It's that time of year again, and as we get closer to night one of the draft, we have to go through Tori's final mock draft of the year. Tori, you've outdone yourself once again. You've done so many of these so far in the offseason. How are you feeling about your final one this year?
So I have to be completely honest, I feel solid about the groupings of players that I have going in the first round, but I think compared to drafts of recent years, this class is actually the most interesting in that the first night could go any number of ways based on what teams are valuing. This class is what draft experts are calling a meat and potatoes draft, a starters over stars class, which means how things will fall will ultimately be decided on the grades each individual team gives these players, not necessarily, I think, the overall consensus of these athletes' skills.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump right into Tori McElhaney's final mock draft presented by Georgia Lottery. I want to start with picks 1 through 7, of course, starting with the 3rd overall pick with Travis Hunter. This is unequivocally the most talented and versatile player in this year's draft. You have him going 3rd overall to the New York Giants, of course. A big question with him going into the draft, though, is will NFL teams allow him to play both ways? If the Giants do decide to take him, do you think they will allow him to play both ways?
So you kind of said it. Whatever the Giants need, Travis Hunter provides. He's the reigning Heisman Trophy winner for a reason worthy of a number 3 overall pick in this year's draft. But to answer your question about whether or not the teams will let him play both ways, I think if we're talking about the Browns taking him at number 2 instead of the Giants at number 3, you could see Cleveland be a bit more inclined to keep him as a full-time receiver, which kind of goes against what a lot of teams value him most as, which is a corner. However, I like this pairing of New York and Travis Hunter because the Giants could realistically value him at both because they could use reinforcements at both. For that reason, I like Travis Hunter in New York.
All right, now the same thing goes from last year. No trades in this mock draft, but could you see the Giants trading down, and why is that?
Yeah, so despite signing Russell Wilson this offseason to a 1-year deal, the Giants are still in need of a long-term quarterback answer. And if they really wanted to test the waters of this year's draft class, they could move down and get in the position to take someone like a Shedeur Sanders, who, yes, we will talk about later. Or heck, I guess they could take him at number 3 too, whatever works. However, I think the better idea is to see how things shake out in the early 2nd round. I feel like you could get someone like a Jalen Milroe outside the 1st round and feel good about your depth behind Wilson. Also, let's be honest, knowing the quarterback class in 2026, I don't think I would force a quarterback in this year's class if I'm the Giants. I really think they just don't need to do that yet.
All right, well, we'll see what they decide to do at 3. Sounds like either way, whether it's a quarterback or Travis Hunter, it's going to be a big splash for them this year. Let's go ahead and flip it to number 8 all the way down to 14. I want to start with the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints, because this is what the Falcons fans really care about. Let's start at number 8, Jalen Walker, the Georgia Bulldog. The Carolina Panthers, right? They have had a hole missing in that edge rusher position with Brian Burns being traded up to the Giants. They ended 29th in the league last year, 32 total sacks all season. Why will Jalen Walker fill the shoes that Brian Burns left?
So I'll be honest, there has been no one, and I do mean no one, I've mocked more to one team than I have Jalen Walker to the Carolina Panthers. And that's because I think his versatile play style could work well off the many defensive additions the Panthers have made to their roster this offseason. The Panthers have pumped a lot of resources into every level of their defense, signing guys like defensive tackles Bobby Brown III or Tershawn Wharton and extending quarterback J.C. Horn to a massive 4-year deal. They need someone who can complement this mass overhaul, and that's someone like Jalen Walker, if you ask me.
All right, y'all are going to get upset with me for asking this question, but I'm just trying to get Jalen Walker down to the 15th overall pick. Walker was a 1-year starter for Georgia, and while he was a Butkus Award winner, there are so many other players that have a lot more starting reps under their belt. They have a lot more sacks than Jalen Walker. Why do you have him going so high in this draft?
I think it's because of that versatility that we talked about that he provides, or better yet, the creativity that opens up when you're a defensive coordinator scheming for him. Kirby Smart had him splitting reps between inside linebacker, outside linebacker, and more of a traditional edge rusher role. But Walker himself has said that he is at his best when he's used as a chess piece. And I think that right there makes him one of the more intriguing prospects of this 1st round.
All right, let's go ahead and move over to the 9th overall pick. Now, this was a late change in this year's mock draft due to Derek Carr injuring his shoulder and potentially being out for a large part, if not the entire 2025 season. Tori, the need for for quarterback just went from they could probably wait for the 2026 to, oh my gosh, we need one right now. They've also got a new head coach in Kellen Moore, and now potentially a new quarterback, which would mean a new era in New Orleans. Talk to me about Shedeur Sanders.
Well, first off, it's hilarious because I literally messaged Taylor and our production team last minute saying, hey guys, we need to change the mock draft. Because truth be told, I thought all of this smoke about Sanders going to the Saints was just that, smoke. That is, until the news broke about Carr's reported injury and the TBD nature of when he could be available. That changed things for me, as I am sure it did the Saints too. I think if you're working off the assumption that Sanders is QB2 in the class, a team like the Saints probably can't afford to wait around for him in the second round. He may be the most polarizing player in this draft, but that may be too big of a risk now that the Saints have a major quarterback question that needs answering now.
This is such a critical decision for the Saints this year that could ripple into the next 5 years for them. Why would Sanders be a person and a player that the Saints can build their organization around?
So they may not have much of a choice, if I'm being honest. It's a really tough situation to see where the Saints go from here because everything about this feels up in the air. I don't think they can afford to run out Spencer Rattler every week in 2025, so if they can't get a proven veteran, you may roll the dice with Sanders and hope his athleticism and savvy nature gets you by as he develops into his own in the league. And honestly, who knows? Maybe he turns into a staple in New Orleans.
All right, well now it's time to talk about the 15th overall pick. Last year, you mocked Dallas Turner, the edge rusher, to be drafted, and this year, again, you have mocked an edge rusher. Who do you have the Falcons taking at 15?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep mocking an edge rusher to the Falcons until they actually do it. And y'all, this could, and I think should, be the year. I have the Falcons taking Marshall's Mike Green with the number 15 overall pick. He may come from a smaller school, but make no mistake about it, this guy is violent, he's disruptive, and everyone wants to talk about those 17 sacks last year, and they should. But there's a lot to like about his overall arsenal too.
All right, so we kind of mentioned this with Walker. This is such a deep edge rusher group this year, and being at 15 gives you so many options if you are the Atlanta Falcons, Terry Fontenot, and that front office. So could you see the Falcons trading in this year's draft?
I absolutely could. And in fact, I actually had the Falcons doing that very thing in my most recent 7-round mock draft on AtlantaFalcons.com. We all know the Falcons only have 5 total picks in this year's draft, 2 of which are 7th rounders. So if I'm Terry Fontenot, I'm doing what I can to move up and down the draft board across all 3 days. A surefire way to do that is to trade down in the first round and accrue more draft capital. I think if you can stay anywhere between picks 18 and 27, you have a good chance of seeing an edge rusher like Shamar Stewart, Mykel Williams, Donovan Izaraku be available from the edge rusher position, let alone some really good D tackles, some corners. The problem though is that you need a partner to trade with. Does this draft class have enough star power to get teams in the back half of the first round to move up? That's a big question.
Huge question. The edge position has been a big need for the Falcons for the last few years, but now there's also a need for a cornerback. Why do you think Terry Fontenot in this front office will go after the edge position before tackling the cornerback?
So I do feel that there will still be some viable cornerback options that will be around in the second round. Think players like Maxwell Harrison if he falls out of the first round, or Ole Miss's Trey Amos. You could also look at some safeties in that second round too, and honestly, that's something that I'm really looking into. I personally really like Notre Dame's Xavier Watts if he's hanging around that top 50 spot. I say that because the Falcons have brought back so many secondary players from the 2024 roster. So I actually feel pretty good about the depth that they have at corner specifically, particularly because you know someone like Mike Hughes can play inside, can play outside, depending on what you get in the draft. Safety, though, is a bit more of a toss-up in my eyes right now.
All right, I agree. I think the Falcons will be taking an edge rusher here, and hopefully Tori and I are right on the track this year with who the Falcons will be taking. Let's go ahead and take a look at picks 16 through 23. Staying in the NFC South, I want to go right here, 19 overall with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You have Campbell going. This is the first linebacker off the board. Yes, we've talked about some edge rushers who probably played some outside linebacker in their time in college, but this is the first linebacker. Why would he fit into the scheme that Tampa has?
Well, for starters, they need a long-term linebacker since Levante David isn't getting any younger. And second, if we are looking at how this board fell, Campbell is arguably the best player still available at number 19. He's actually one of my favorite just sheer athletes in the draft. He's fast, he's powerful, and I think you can do some creative things with him and him be just as impactful stopping the run up the middle or blitzing from different spots along that front seven.
All right, I know I kind of asked you about the edge edge rusher position, Campbell is a former 5-star recruit as an edge rusher. Tampa needs a linebacker, yes, but they also need a corner and someone coming off the edge. Do you see the Bucs putting him in more of that edge position or keeping him more as a linebacker?
I don't think there's anyone saying that he can't do both, depending on what the look and the call is. He's someone you could line up where you feel like you most need him. He's that type of athlete. It's not unheard of for a true linebacker to get up at the line of scrimmage or have specific blitzes dialed up for him. We saw it all year with Caden Ellis last year. So I think when it comes to Campbell and the Bucs, we'll probably do a little bit of everything for him.
All right, well, we'll see what happens at pick 19. Let's go ahead and get to the last little bit of picks here. 24 all the way down to 32. And something I want to point out really fast is that she's got a little bit of a trend going here. 25, 26, 27, all offensive tackles, and then you come over here, 28, 29, and 30, all taking edge rushers or a D tackle over here. Talk to me about this trend later in this round one.
Yeah, so it's all about needs and who kind of the best guys on the board are to fill those needs, especially picks 28 through 31. Those teams, a lot of them are the ones that need edge rushers. They need defensive tackles. So if it works out in this way that a lot of these guys fall to them, I think there could be a significant run in the final 5 picks on some of these front 7 guys.
All right, the NFL draft is just a few days away and the Falcons are sitting at pick 15 in this year's draft. Make sure to follow Atlanta Falcons on social for all the updates during draft weekend and comment down below who you think the Falcons will take in the first round. Tori, thank you so much for joining me again this year, and we'll see you guys on draft night for our pre-draft show starting at 7 p.m.